everybody. It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome, and welcome to a flashback episode. If you're watching and it happens to be a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. Very glad that you're here this evening. I am really excited for this official launch of this segment on our channel. We've been trying to get it off the ground for quite some time. It started with an excellent conversation just a few weeks back. And of course, when it comes to anything nostalgic, Cammie's got to be here. And Cammie, it's always a pleasure to have you. I'm hoping that you're excited for this launch of this brand new segment.
I feel like I've been waiting for this discussion forever.
So before we get into it, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between, I actually have to say a little somber thing. To all the faithful of the comic book world, you probably have heard that just less than 24 hours ago, we lost a modern day legend in the comic book world. We lost a name that I have known for many years, one that was a predominant name in my youth reading comic books. And that, of course, is the legendary Peter David. He had been in very poor health. It was so sad to hear how badly he was suffering from his family. And we're glad to know that his suffering is now officially over. But I personally will never forget some of the greatest things that he gave the world of comics. He had an amazing, incredible Hulk run in the 90s. Through that run, he gave us one of his most unique and iconic versions of the Hulk in the legendary character of the Maestro. If you haven't read The Incredible Hulk, Future Imperfect, it is such a brilliant book. And he had a wonderful trilogy of the Maestro, 5-issue miniseries each. It came out during the pandemic, believe it or not, and they were so wonderful. But of course, you also have his Aquaman run, his run on Spider-Man, and so many other wonderful things. So, yeah, it's just so sad to know that he is officially no longer with us. So, sir, thank you for shaping my love for comics and what it is. I salute you, and I will never forget the wonderful work that you did.
Absolutely. It's always hard to lose the legends.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the ones that were just so iconic in such a recent time. Because when you think of the 90s was such a monumental decade for comic books because not only did you have the birth of Image Comics, you had some of the best writers doing some of the greatest things for the big two. You had some of the greatest stories from Superman, Batman, and Marvel. The X-Men were unbelievable at the time. Everybody basically put the X-Men on a pedestal at that point in time. But you think about amazing artists and writers like Doug Moennick and Mark Waid, Peter David, of course, John Byrne, Ron Mars, Scott Lobdell, you name it. These guys were just doing incredible work. And it was such a great time to be alive, to reading some of these brand new stories from some of these iconic heroes. But speaking of iconic heroes, we have to talk about a major revelation that is taking place in comics right now. And that is the fact that we're seeing these comic books, and not necessarily coming from the big two, of classic nostalgic franchises, whether they're old comic strips, cartoons, television shows. We're seeing a major explosion of these beloved characters coming to the pages of comic books for whole new generations to read, and also generations that grew up with them. And I thought that it was appropriate to start this flashback series with one of the most iconic names in comics history, a name that even precedes Superman and Batman. And that, of course, is the creation from Chester Gould from 1931, the legendary Dick Tracy. Of course, we're going to be talking about the first story arc from Alex Segura and Mark Moresi. These two guys are giving us a whole new way to enjoy Dick Tracy. And perfect timing, too, that we're talking about it, because this book came out last year, and it was one of my top 5 unexpected, incredible reads. And this year is the 35th anniversary of the Warren Beatty film that brought Dick Tracy back to the mainstream for a whole new bunch of people to enjoy. So we're getting this series from Mad Cave Studios is another revival of this franchise.
Mad Cave actually puts out some really good titles. I think Mad Cave is really starting to be one of my go-tos. I see a lot more titles now when I go to the comic book store every month. So, it's definitely one that I would contend with as my top five now.
Well, that's
But
a
to
good
have,
thing that you're saying because Mad Cave Studios is like you think of comic companies and you think of the type of power that they have to bring these franchises. And when you take a look at these specific kinds of titles, you see Boom Studios, you see Mad Cave, you see Dynamite Entertainment. I mean, Mad Cave Studios was a name that I didn't even know about when I even got back into comics. And it was all because of the fact that there was this one little title that came out by a guy named Dave Hassan, and it was called Nottingham, a noir story on the take of Robin Hood. A lot of people gave it a lot of buzz. A lot of people said that it was really good. And so while Dynamite is really running the pack in regards to nostalgic characters and nostalgic franchises, Mad Cave has definitely grabbed their share of the pack. I mean, the fact that Dick Tracy was one of the first, and now they've got a comic book series based on the legendary anime series from Tatsunoko Entertainment, which is Gatchaman. It's being written by Cullen Bunn and Steve Orlando. And I'm personally excited for July because David Pepos, who is writing nostalgic titles over at Dynamite, like Captain Planet and Space Ghost, he's going to be giving us Speed Racer this summer. So I'm really excited. There's a lot to look forward to. And Dick Tracy was one of the few titles in this nostalgic boom that I got on board on right away. And I'm just enjoying this ride more so sometimes than I'm reading anything from the big two and even Image has to offer.
oh well, the minute I saw Dick Tracy, I was on board. I have been a fan. Obviously, you mentioned the movie that we are celebrating this year, and that was huge for me. That has such an amazing cast, and it really is timeless. The fact that Danny Elfman did the soundtrack and the score for that is, if you're a Batman the Animated Series fan, you can hear a lot of similar tunes within the intro and the exit, within the fighting scenes and everything. So if you're a fan of that, you are definitely a fan of Dick Tracy. And of course, Dick Tracy is timeless. You alluded to the beginning writings in the 1930s. Then we had the 1950s with Ralph Bird. So if you're a fan of black and white detectives, that really just kind of brought those detective stories from the pages to the screen. And then we had the 1960s cartoon, which is fun and campy. It was just a way to kind of add some color, if you will, to that. And then we got the movie that we just discussed with Warren Beatty. And now we're here. And to see Dick Tracy going into a new generation and to the hands of new readers, and of course, like us, nostalgic readers, is great because it allows for Dick Tracy's legacy to continue and for more stories from his catalog to be told. And I love that.
Well, I think what I love so much about Dick Tracy as a title right now, as well as some of the other nostalgic titles, it's just the fact that these little companies are really looking for the right people to write these stories because what I absolutely love is that all of them are sharing a common theme, and that is the fact that they're getting a fresh, modern take, but at the same time, they're holding on to those little nostalgic bits that still portray the legacy and the little themes and nuances that make these franchises as iconic as they are. And yes, I'm always interested in something new. But at the same time, I want these people to not forget where these characters come from. And I will say that Segura and Moretti, they hit it all. They get it. They get it. This first arc, I still remember when I read the first issue, like I was excited, but at the same time, I was very skeptical because, at the same time, as someone who does read a decent amount of comics every week, I want to make sure that I'm getting my money's worth. And I just remember when I finished that first issue, I was like, holy cow, that was so good. I was so shocked. And I was like, I really hope they keep this momentum going. And by the time I finished the fifth issue, which was the conclusion of this first story arc, I was like, oh no, I am going to continue with this. And we're already finished. And just so everybody knows, the second story arc is done. It just finished about a week ago, and I'm ready for arc three. I really am.
Yeah, there's just so much powerhouse excitement in these issues, and it's power packed with all of the classic characters. But I feel like it has a new take and a new twist on these characters. It feels nostalgic, but it feels modern, which is a really hard thing to do. Where you keep that nostalgic feeling, you keep the legacy of these characters, but you make it feel fresh and fun for new generations. And I really think this first story arc did just all that. It checked all the boxes. The coloring is just perfection. I think it's just got just enough violence, but they didn't overdo it because, from the past movies and, any other presentations, it's violent, but it's not over the top. And sometimes when you get a reboot or a recreation, people try to take it to that next level because we have, a broader audience, or we stomach more these days, that kind of thing. And I'm glad they kind of kept that PG kind of feel to it. Still
Basically,
violent though.
oh yeah, they definitely know when to throw in the violence. So and it starts right off the bat. There is a big shootout at a local diner, and I love how these specific types of stories come to be, because I've seen, whether it's in other books or in television shows, when you get two people that are trying to possibly expose someone through the purposes of media, in this case in the newspapers, when people are after these guys because they know that they know something, that's what always gets me going. So we see a reporter we see two reporters basically getting together at a diner, and they're ready to shed some light on a big corruption scheme that's going on. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of gangsters invade the diner and they shoot everybody up, but they're specifically looking for those two guys. And so, of course, Dick Tracy comes in and he starts to look at everything. And that's when he is introduced to the daughter of one of the people who was shot. And it is none other than Tess Trueheart.
Yes, and Trueheart, though he wasn't a reporter, he was a politician, wasn't he?
I don't think he was a politician.
Well, I think he was kind of like an
Someone who
office
knew something.
politician. I don't think he was a reporter though. I think he had like an office, a desk job that kind of kept him in with city
He was a
entanglement.
journalist.
No, the other gentleman that was sitting with him there, Marsh, was a journalist. He was
Uh,
a kind of a B-list crime detective journalist, and Dick Tracy was not fond of him, rather, because by the time he ended up on scene, Marsh was already deceased. But no, the Tess's father, I believe, is like a small time politician.
okay.
But nonetheless, I mean, yeah, you have a politician and a reporter there. They're up to no good. They're obviously sharing secrets and swapping secrets. So it was like, okay, well, what do they have to tell? And it kind of opens up very quickly to this like mafia type connection, which I love. And it takes us to this housing development, and we kind of get this feeling that Tess's father was a little bit more of a player in this than he may have let on with her, at least. But she knew, in terms of like who her dad was, that he was really good about keeping notes. And so she went right into detective mode. And I love the dynamic that Tess shares with Dick Tracy, because they're such a dynamic duo all their own. We know from past entanglements that there is a love connection there, and maybe we'll get there in the comic. But in terms of the detective, I mean, she showed her true colors in this first story arc. So
Yeah,
it was
and that's the other thing. The story hits you so hard because they bring in all the famous faces. I mean,
they
right
do.
off the bat, you see Mumbles, you see Flat Top, you see Itchy. I mean, I got really excited when my favorite gangster showed up. My favorite was always Prune Face. So when Prune Face shows up, and I love the layout. I love how he just like slowly walks out of the shadows, and you see that very ugly mug, like literally, and it's just like, oh man, he means business. That was just so much fun.
I will say though, I was kind of sad that all of our favorites got killed off so quickly. Like
Killed off
Mumbles.
really quickly in the movie too.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. I guess Well, Mumbles doesn't, not in the Warren Beatty
Well, no, not
version.
no. Mumbles is one of the few that actually survives.
Yeah, he survives, but yeah, so I guess maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just mumbling about Mumbles because he's always been a favorite of mine. I love his character and I just love how sloppy he is, but underlying, he uses his speech impediment to kind of mask the truth. He always knows the answers. So I guess to see him killed off so quickly, I'm like, he's going with so many secrets. But
Yeah,
yeah,
because
we get so many nostalgic faces in this. It's great. So if you're,
and
definitely here for the nostalgia, you're gonna love this first story arc.
that's the other thing that's very positive about this first arc. They really hold to the mannerisms of these characters. It's
Yeah.
just like when you read the pages of this book, it's like when you see the word bubbles of flat top, you could already hear like, what are you doing here, cop? Like you hear that classic radio show gangster voice that makes you so excited. And yeah, so they get Mumbles into this match because they know Mumbles knows something and they know that he likes to talk. So they try and get him, they try to hide him, but of course, he's found and he's gone right off the bat.
Yep. At the hands of Flat Top, nonetheless. And Flat Top's
Nonetheless,
character, he is drawn so well. I really enjoyed looking at him throughout this whole first story arc. I think he just has the right amount of violence because he is probably the most violent character out of everyone that we are introduced to in this first arc, and he just carries it so well. He's very believable, and he is able to kind of see this storyline through to the end because of that, because he's tried and true, and I like that.
exactly. Yeah, the thing
He's a good
about him is that
villain.
he's always the most villainous one. He's the trigger happy guy, that's what makes him
Yeah.
so exciting. Yeah. So then we get introduced to a couple of other characters and what their roles are. We're introduced to Pat Patton, who has a bit of a story to tell, as well as a lot of the communication that Tracy has with the chief of police, because the chief is not really too fond of the way that Dick Tracy is operating. But the best part is, towards the end of the story, we find out why he's so unhappy with Dick Tracy's methods, because that's the thing that makes Dick Tracy such a great character. He's a straight arrow cop. It's the law. He always wants to make sure that justice is served and he follows the law, but he will do a couple of unorthodox things in order to get justice. But at the same time, there's personally, at least for me, there's no reason to question this guy because we know that what he is doing is for the forces of good. He is an all-around good guy.
And I'm so glad you mentioned Patton, because I love that backstory that we get kind of as we follow through. I think that seeing that they were war buddies and
Yeah,
they have that kind of inlaced trauma that takes them now to their current positions, and obviously they have very different roles. Dick Tracy went into law, and then Patton is kind of like one that teeters with both sides. We're not really sure if he's a good guy or a bad guy yet. He's got traits of both, but to see how that trauma continues to affect them even today, and how they carry those flashback scenes, and it takes them to the recent explosions and stuff like that, it really added a whole different layer for me in terms of seeing the side of war and how it affects the men and women that are going to these battles, and then how they have to just live these very normal lives, or as close to normal as possible. But big incidents and sometimes even little things can trigger these flashbacks, these memories, and to just have that storyline underneath all of this excitement and violence that's going on around you, it really did something special to the story to carry it through, and it made me want to continue to read.
so there was another character that we haven't gotten to yet because he does have a big role. He's a lot more unseen. He's more like in the background. But I'm really curious about your thoughts about the artist's portrayal of Big Boy. Because when we think of Big Boy Caprice, we think Al Pacino as people who grew up at that point in time. So he's drawn very differently. He
Yes.
is also, the way he carries himself is very different. He's not so hot tempered. He's not so edgy. You want to know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of Fat Tony from The Simpsons.
It's just funny because he reminds me of Tony from The Sopranos.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
Yeah, because Tony, I mean, he's very he's a powerhouse, but he is very subdued. He's very laid back and he doesn't get in your face or get angry or over amplified because he knows at the end of the day, hey, it's my way or the highway. And so to see Caprice in kind of this backlight kind of a way was very interesting because as you alluded to, we're accustomed to the Pacino, the loud in your face. It's gonna
I'm
be my
sure.
way. This is my streets. These are my people. And so to go and see him in this very quiet light was interesting. He is at all costs my absolute favorite villain. I think Flat Top is the quintessential villain for me in terms of like, how he carries through a just a consistent array of violence. Like he holds no qualms against anybody. He just wants to kill and be seen and be heard and kill as much as possible. With Caprice, you kind of get um this different feel. He's the big mob boss, but you're not really sure what his take in this is, And I think that for me was very different from having gone from the Warren Beatty generation, because you knew kind of what his goal was and who he was and, kind of how he was always on Tracy's tail. And here having just little bits of him in every issue was like, okay, well, when's he going to pop off? When's he going to tell us what he's doing? So I think that added some really great, like thriller elements to this story.
Yeah.
It was really well written.
You're definitely left on the edge of your seat at the end of every single issue because there's so many things at play, because it's amazing that he did everything behind the scenes and yet he still ends up doing something very similar to what the movie version of Big Boy did in regards to owning the city. Because the thing that I can definitely say, and I'm not going to give any teases to the next arc, but you can tell throughout this book that there is so much influence from the 1990 film, from the characters to the story points to some of the ways that they go against each other. I mean, obviously, if you got Big Boy Caprice in this book, you got to have Lips Manless as well. So, of course, Lips Manless has a role to play, not as big of a role because he doesn't really he's not the owner of the Club Ritz. He's this guy who lives out in the suburbs, but he's still got a lot of power. Kind of loved the fact that one of the characters that only has a very small moment in the very beginning of the movie gets a little bit of a role in this book, and that's Shoulders. I love the role that Shoulders had to play in this book as well.
No, I agree. When Shoulders came on scene, I was like, hey, finally Shoulders. You're right. It's a bleep, but it's enough to be like a nod to what we love. And that's why I'm saying this really appeals to us in our generation and, the Warren Beatty, Dick Tracy lovers. But it didn't just paint that same picture. And it really annoys me when people just kind of take what was and make it what is. This stands alone. This really is its own true story. And we will revisit some of those favorite characters and some of those beloved scenes, but we're not getting a regurgitated or kind of a stringy version of our 90s favorite. We're getting something completely different with some of our favorite characters. And for that, I think this was a real masterpiece.
Yeah,
It
because one of
really
the
has
few
good meat
things,
and potatoes or
because
good
one of the
bones.
because one of the few things that I really love, and you have that in the middle of the story, is the fact that they also say that even though Dick Tracy is a hero and
Mhm.
he lives by the law, he's up for justice. I like the fact that they make him human because of the fact that there's a moment where he literally gets fooled, and the villains are a step ahead of him when he raids and there's nothing there. I love the fact that they even show that he's not perfect and that he can jump the gun a little bit. I like the fact that they gave him some faults, but at the same time, because you get those faults, you sympathize with him more and you want him to solve this case.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And you've seen that really with every facet of Dick Tracy that we've gotten from the early 1950s through our cartoon and movie eras. Dick Tracy has faults. He's not perfect. He is a human man. He has areas where he kind of needs assistance from other people. Here he got the assistance of Patton and from Tess. In our Warren Beatty movie, he got some assistance again from Tess and the kid, you know, so we've seen him kind of lean on people, but at the end of the day, he's still our hero. He's still the one that we are like, hey, he's the one that saved the day. He's the one that wrapped the case, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I love his look. His look is so classic, and I'm just so
Okay.
happy he's still in
You
that
you
yellow
you
trench coat.
you can definitely tell that once again, they take the right nostalgic elements from the things that came before it to remind you of all these wonderful things. So yes, you see the Warren Beatty yellow trench coat, and at the same time, the way that he's drawn, it looks like the Chester Gould comic strip, the very boxy square face. I love it. I absolutely love it. And then things start to really get heat up when Tracy gets arrested because the chief of police has basically said to him that you've overstepped your grounds. But Tracy and Pat and Tess, they solved the fact that Tracy is being arrested for a specific reason, and it's the fact that the chief basically sold out to the mob.
I kind of felt from the beginning that he was the bad guy, but I wasn't quite sure because he gives this love hate relationship with Tracy. And I couldn't figure out if he was just kind of busting his balls, so to speak, you know, just like, hey, lay off. I'm the cop, you're the detective. I know how to solve these cases. And then he would allude to, we're not at war anymore. But
Yeah,
when he started doing that a lot, I'm like, I think you're a dirty cop. And then, of course, Patton had, you know, alluded, I think in the third issue, that it was probably someone on the inside. And I'm like,
yeah.
it's gotta be him.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, the first story arc wraps up in such a wonderful way because of course it ends with the four words that you love to hear from Dick Tracy, and that is "I'm on my way." I love
Yes,
when they did that. He's got the wristwatch and everything. It's like you can hear the Danny Elfman score in the background the minute
yes.
you see that last panel. Yeah, and the artwork is beautiful too. I mean, I didn't get a chance to mention Geraldo Borges. I think that his artwork on this book beautifully sells it. It just once again, captures what you love about Dick Tracy. No, I had an absolute blast with this first story arc. Because, you know how many things in comics I love, and you know how I love my superheroes, but at the same time, you also know how much I love my indies. And don't forget, you know this too. I'm also not too big on noir from time to time. There are a lot of noir
That's true.
titles that I just do not get, but
That's true.
I think it's just because of the fact that this is a character that I know and love, and this is the kind of noir that I know and love. I had a feeling I was going to love this book. I really, but again, I didn't expect it to be this good. And the part that
It's true.
really upsets me is the fact that outside of my circle, who else was talking about this?
This is true. But I do think that noir is of the essence in detective world. You know, it fits so beautifully. It is noir, you know, it just gives you that right ambiance. But I will say, in terms of the last issue, I love how it kind of went from that grayscale to that bright poppy color. That for me was everything, because, you know, as you alluded to, we get that classic you know, one liner from him, we get the feel, the watch, the whole nine. But it just gave it a breath of fresh air, and again, it gets you excited, like, okay, let's go, arc two, we're on, you know. And I think that if this continues to be that powerful, I mean, I see some longevity here, because the beauty with detective stories is there's a lot to tell. You know, you're of course going to kill off some beloved characters early on. So, you know, I don't know how far this might go, because we did see a lot of death in the first arc of, you know,
Yeah,
characters that we
but
know
there's
and
still a
love.
whole bunch of villains we haven't gotten yet.
But that's just it. That's what's great about the whole Dick Tracy legacy, is there's so many character villains that we haven't seen yet. So this really could last a while, you know, and I'm here for the ride.
And Big Boy's not dead.
And he's not dead. You're absolutely right.
I don't think even Lips Manlis is dead yet either.
He is not. So yeah,
No,
so I think
I
there's
was
more
sad they
story to
killed. I will
tell.
definitely sad they killed off Prune Face, Itchy, and Flat Top too quick. I think that's one of the only issues I have with that book. They killed these guys off
Yeah,
too quickly.
yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, some of our beloved characters went real quick in this first arc, and I was like, oh, that. So it didn't give me a lot of hope for the second arc. I have kind of already started to dabble into that, so I know a little bit of what's coming. But I do think that, you know, with detective stories, there's a lot of story to tell. So maybe we'll get some new characters. Maybe they'll pull
I
some
don't
stuff out of the archives. But I think there's so much potential there. And if you haven't read it, you need to pick it up because the artwork alone on these are just they're amazing, you know?
Yeah, I think that's one of the major things that I think about, and it's the fact that these small books that come from these small companies, these really need to be sold on word of mouth. You know, people need to talk about these. I mean, I still find it crazy when I take a look at the top sales in comics. I'm still trying to figure out why Marvel has so many titles in the top 50 because I'm still trying to find Marvel comics that I actually enjoy reading right now. I mean, especially considering that over the weekend, I actually, before I found out that Peter David died, I actually read an old Hulk story that I had never read before. I had had the copy of the Incredible Hulk 400 in my comic books for years. And I said, you know what? I had no idea. I didn't even look at it. It was a fourth part of a four-issue story. So on Free Comic Book Day, I went and picked up the Incredible Hulk issues 397 to 399. So I just read the whole story and I'm like, why isn't Marvel writing comic books like this anymore? Because this is how comic books were, and this is why they were so great back in the 90s. But yes, we're in a new era, we're in a new market. There's so many different kinds of stories out there. The sky is the limit for what you crave. Personally, I think that Western comics are just as vast as manga right now. You can get a story on anything. But when people even talk about a very popular series of books in Image Comics, the Ghost Machine universe, people are still trying to figure out why nobody's reading these books. And they're
I
all
just think
excellent books.
it's what we do, you know, it's what we pride ourselves here on. That's comical. We sit down and we have these real time discussions. And I think we need to continue that legacy for this channel because it's discussions like these that are going to get more people hopefully reading these books, you know, because DC and Marvel get so much press. I mean, they have so much bank that they can distribute this media circuit, and people are just so drawn to, oh, let me be the first to post, and let me, you know, tag Marvel, let me tag DC in hopes that they're going to pick up some kind of monetary deal from it. So DC and Marvel are overpressed. We need to be advocating for Image, for Mad Cave, for Boom, you know, as much as possible, because honestly, in my opinion, that's where the stories are at.
Absolutely. And right now, I've even been. And it's really funny. It's like I go to my local comic book store, and people who come into the store, like they'll actually see one of these nostalgic titles on the shelves. Like you don't. I would probably say right now 3 times I've been in my comic book store and someone's been asking about the Space Ghost book, and I basically have said every single time I'm there, "Why are you not reading it yet? It's so good."
And
You
it's
know?
funny that you say that because this past Wednesday when I went to go pick up all my pulls, I would say probably 80% of my stack was Mad Cave. And I had a couple kids looking over my shoulder like, hey, what's that title? You know, I'm like, oh, you've got to be reading this, you know? And I show and share and talk and discuss. And that's how you get new readers. That's how you open up people's eyes that
Yeah.
comics are more than DC and Marvel. And if you're not exploring these indie comic companies, if you're not trying, you know, things that are not necessarily in everybody's to be read list or on their videos, you know, we're all talking about different things and some of us are reading things that are cooler than others, you know. And
And I don't.
i
Yeah. And I
I
mean,
think
I
that
also
we're
don't.
reading fun stuff.
And I mean, I also don't feel, a guy like Tom McFarlane, he's a big name guy and he
Of course.
knows that he's got his faithful. He doesn't, I mean, Spawn really like goes under the radar almost all the time, but all the loyal fans are picking up the book, myself included. Whenever the new Spawn title comes out, everyone picks it up because they know the guy or character, they love the story. But right now, when it comes to my favorite reads, it's the Energon universe, it's the Ghost Machine universe, and then it's just about every single nostalgic title. The Dick Tracy's, the Space Ghosts, the Silverhawks, the Thundercats, these are all great reads. And it's more about the fact that, I haven't watched these shows in such a long time. I don't think I will be watching these shows anytime soon. But I just love the fact that these great creators and these companies are giving these titles a chance because they're capturing that little bug and they're giving me something fresh and something for a mature reader, mind you. It just makes me wonder what are the other things that they could possibly do, because there's so many other nostalgic titles that I think that they can just do so many amazing things with. But time will tell. But again, I think that when it comes to the nostalgic books, this was Dick Tracy was the first non-Energon universe title that I bought. It came out in March of 2024, and like I said, it was in my top 5 of the year. It was this good, guys, and I'm really looking forward to talking about the second arc with Cammy, hopefully some other people. It's such a good read. I highly recommend it, and I will just tell you, based on the cover of the 11th issue that's coming out in August, I think I already know who the main villain is going to be, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, there's some definitely fun stuff to look forward to with this. And like I said, as long as they keep giving us stories, I'm on board for these Dick Tracy issues.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for watching this first real episode of Flashback. This was so much fun, Cammy. I'm looking forward to more of these episodes because I'm just really excited to gush about these titles because there's so many great ones. And whether it's talking with you, I know Teddy wants to talk about some of them, Andy wants to talk about some of them. So this is going to probably be the most fun segment on the channel. I don't know why. I can feel it. I can just simply feel it.
Well, we say it all the time. When we're passionate about something, it shows. And I think that with nostalgia, equally, everyone you just mentioned has been bitten at some point by the nostalgia bug, and we carry that with us, and we carry the torch, and we have this passion to carry it on for future generations. So when we talk to you guys about these, I mean, this is real legitimate excitement. This is real legitimate enjoyment. And I think that's the type of readers that you need to be gravitating to, the ones that are going to be honest with you, because if we get a bad issue or a bad arc, we're going to tell you that too. But this is good stuff.
I mean, listen, I've said this to so many people outside of the comic book channel, and I'll say this to everybody right now. I'm sick and tired of television and movies right now. I am not enjoying those as much as I used to. And you're talking about a guy who used to review movies on his solo channel for a living. Right now, my escape is comic books. And the last time I was at the comic book store, I talked about how much I'm reading. And the guy said to me, listen, it's all worth it if you're enjoying what you read, because if you are loving what you're reading, then it doesn't matter how much money you're spending. I mean, sometimes it does matter, but it's true. I wouldn't be reading all of this stuff if it wasn't that good, and these are all great books. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. Leave a comment in the box below. Please let us know if you are reading Dick Tracy. And if you did read it and you didn't like it, let me know what it was about it that you didn't like. Because I'd really like to know. Because, look, I've dropped a title in my life. As a matter of fact, I haven't gotten any hate comments yet, but I've said it in the statistics videos. I dropped all the first bunch of the Absolute titles over at DC. But not that I didn't enjoy them. I had my reasons for it. But this is a good book. I'd like to know if you're reading it. I'd like to know if you stopped reading it. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're up to date with all our latest content, and we will see you in the next one.